Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. This episode is brought to you by Heroic Labs, which powers some of the world's biggest games with its Heroic game stack. Its composable products are Nakama, the open source backend game server, Hero, the game development framework for all your live service game features, including the complexity of managing offline mode, Satori, the world-class live ops product for maximizing monetization and retention, and lastly, the Heroic Cloud to provide massive scalability. After nearly 10 years of operation, thousands of studios trust Heroic Labs to help them focus on their games and not worry about game tech or scaling for success. To learn more and reach out, make sure to visit heroiclabs.com or check out the link in the show notes. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Devin Becker, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Aaron Bush, who a familiar face you may know from both being on the interview side as well as on the interviewee side here. He is a managing partner and co-founder at Naavik. And today we're going to discuss something we don't get a chance to do very often. We've done just once before, which is to check in on the overall game market and some topics just across the broader game industry, dive into some different areas and just see what's going on besides just the individual news hits. So, Aaron, though, why don't we start off what's going on at Naavik?
Happy to be here. I always wanted to just chat about what's going on. Naavik, business as usual, where our consulting team is just helping a bunch of companies around the industry. One of the newer things that we're ramping up. By the time that this episode goes live, we'll have published our new second cohort of our fractional talent team, and so we've been building out our team of people that can basically plug in across any part-time role that any game team would want. And so from anything from analytics to game design to narrative to QA to you name it, where we've built out a pretty robust team that can plug in. So if anyone is listening at any point needs some part-time fractional support for what you're making, there's a good chance that Naavik has a great person for you. So just let us know. But otherwise, largely been business as usual.
Well, that's a good thing, though, definitely, because business as usual is usually very busy with Naavik. So definitely good to hear. Why don't we just start by going through a few different high-level topics, some things that some stuff has had news articles, some stuff is just kind of broader, but stuff that I think is still worth paying attention to, especially as we're kind of in the middle of the earnings season of some extent, right? Which is always our favorite time to discuss this stuff, because it's when there's actual numbers for people to talk about and people present at least their best face about what's happening. So let's start with the AAA companies. There's a couple of AAAs that are doing good, some not doing so good. I think EA is one that's on top of mind with some good news recently.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because obviously Battlefield 6 has been awesome. We were pretty early to predicting that it would outcompete Call of Duty this year, and that's been a very successful prediction. And of course, being able to rejuvenate a mega franchise like this is a big deal for any publisher, even one of the biggest in the world like EA, and that shows in the results. Of course, it's pretty tragic that Vince Zampella passed away, and that puts probably some questions on where Battlefield goes from here. But in general, the team should be really proud of what they've done. Saudi Arabia should be really happy that that Battlefield 6 is doing well too. It's kind of funny because there are only so many of these mega public companies in the games industry, and generally when one of them like EA reports, LinkedIn and newsletters are flooded with all of the takes. But because they're getting acquired and the price is set and that's not really changing, it kind of doesn't matter, in terms of understanding like where this will go for, the business and the stock when, it's not really like for the public
Yeah.
anymore. And so the conversation there is going to change. At least we still get to see some of the data there, which will go away later this year as more of these companies are just getting consolidated or getting off the market, which I don't love from a public market lens, um, but yeah, I mean, hard to criticize where they're at right now.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky too because like even if they just get like acquired by a bigger public company, you don't always get the details anymore because like it's like you take Microsoft for example, you don't always get all the nitty gritty
Oh
details
yeah,
about all the studios they've acquired. I'm sure they're not reporting a lot of happy details around Call of Duty as you mentioned for Activision Blizzard King
nope,
within Microsoft. So
not this year.
it's tricky, but I mean we'll take the good news from EA while we got it. Like I'm sure with plenty of layoffs and stuff like that. Them kind of relying on sports franchises. It's good to know that that the military sports, so to speak, isn't completely dead over there. That there's still some of their original IP outside of sports franchises that will continue. Hopefully, more than that. I know some people are a little like hesitant, like going into this deal. Is it going to mean expansion or contraction? And I think generally with acquisitions, we know it probably means more likely contraction to an extent before any kind of expansion.
Maybe.
But
Yeah,
we'll
I
see.
guess we haven't really talked about this on the podcast too much. I mean, my take is that like this isn't really a normal private equity deal, right? Like if this
Right,
were just private equity companies, like EA is not the type of business that you go after because it's a good business. Like it doesn't need to be turned around. And
right,
even in this case where private equity is involved to some extent, even though it might even just be more of a stamp of approval for, it's mostly Saudi money going into the deal. It's not really a business that they're need to or like are trying to turn around. Like maybe there'll continue to be some, you know, cost conscious efforts, although I
yeah,
doubt that even is going to be like a major thing that happens here. And if anything, it's where we might see the most action is just how Saudi Arabia views EA and its broader portfolio of
right,
sports and gaming assets, where EA kind of fits at the intersection of that with a lot of video game, like sports games. And so, are there going to be more crossovers with like the leagues that they own and like, pushing more types of like, can you watch sports or like get more involved
yeah,
with like what's happening in the real world in FIFA or in
yeah,
FC, I mean. And so I don't know. That's where I think we'll see the most impact. And I don't think it'll be like that
yeah.
dramatic of like a business catalyst for EA, but maybe on the Saudi ecosystem side, they'll start tying things together in more interesting ways.
Who knows? Given their interest in esports, maybe we'll see a push again for Battlefield esports. Like, there's been attempts in the past; they never really worked out that great, given the nature of the game's a little not esports ish. But you never know.
Maybe
Like, I never thought PUBG would be an esport, right? Just because
esports
of the
World
nature of the
Cup
game. So
2026, 2027. Maybe it'll be there.
absolutely, and Olympics trying to make a push as well. Like, so you never know. Like, we could definitely see a push in that direction because that money is flowing in that direction. But speaking of a company that maybe not as rosy of an outlook and something that I know is one of your favorite companies to talk about, I think
Oh, yes.
Ubisoft, if it could even be called Ubisoft at this point, hard to even say what to call it now because it's turning into this weird kind of beast with Vantage Studios and the other unnamed spawns from that.
Yeah. What a mess, right? Yeah, I don't think we need to rehash all of the generally the negativity that
Right.
we've analyzed about Ubisoft in the newsletter and podcast extensively over the past few years. The crazy part is just that like the saga continues with,
Yeah.
no end in sight. And I would have thought that maybe by this point they could have found their footing somewhere, but that has not been the case at all. And what's the weirdest to me about, or the craziest to me about the latest aspects of this saga is that, like, yeah, the management decided to shut down, a bunch of projects. Like, they need to streamline, what they're working on. Like, fine, like, makes sense. But the outcry from employees about what these changes are, it just
Right.
rings completely like tone deaf to me, where like we see unions coming out like basically like pitching and complaining super hard that like returning to the office and like greater capacity is, like is completely unjustified and against the rights of like being an employee at Ubisoft. And it's like, what? like where has the world come to, or like this culture come to, where like that becomes a more prominent um like take? And a lot of the employees are asking for management to be held accountable to a lot of the clearly bad decisions and bad management that has taken place over the past many years. And it's fair, but at the same time, like, it's sad, but like the best decision Ubisoft could have made to right size its business is by like cutting its employee count in half, because
Yeah,
the revenue per employee and just the bloat of that business is the revenue employee is, you know, so much lower than every other leading publisher, and it
yeah,
has, generally gotten worse. And the bloat there, there've been slight changes. They've cut, had some layoff rounds around the world, but even so, like it hasn't made like too huge of a dent, especially in France, which is where a lot of these unions and the outcries are coming from. And so, yeah, on both sides, I'm just like, man, like
yeah.
it doesn't make any sense what people think is the right thing to do here, and
Right.
it's sad, but yeah, I still don't see like an end to the chaos here. Like this could still be a business that we're like, what in the world is going on
That's
a
why it's your
year from
favorite
now?
business to talk about, because it's just a never-ending source of interesting choices. And I use interesting in not necessarily the nicest way, but I mean, I'm a fan of the company in some ways, but I just watching that sort of trajectory. But like the one thing you point out that I think is relevant to a lot of these layoffs in general is just COVID trajectory in general. Like everyone overhired during COVID, all this stuff happened, the work from home stuff. Like we're still correcting from COVID basically in the entire industry, and Ubisoft maybe even more than others with having to like they obviously had so much middle management in that company. Like the stories I heard of like people having to get like 25 managers to sign off on one decision just to try and even do something towards live ops. It's just I mean, we don't know if that'll be fixed, right, with the creative houses and stuff, but it does sound like that might be a better way to go, is to have a little more independence, a little less, Paris managing everything from on high with every studio tied. But they also like closed those studios that kind of surprised me. So like the union thing with Halifax, where it was like they had the union thing like what was it like just right before, and then the shutdown right after. And I don't know how much other studios were involved, but I know they were doing quite a bit on Division Mobile, and that was looking really good. So I don't know what the fate of that one is now because it wasn't announced as canceled or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been a little skeptical of their mobile efforts, but yeah, I mean, even Vantage Studios is still like headquartered out of France, and so I doubt and that it's more like a just carving different lines of control between the same people as I read it. So I don't think anything much has changed other than just the structure of putting your best assets in one subsidiary type of business that Tencent can take more advantage of. I don't think Tencent's investments in Ubisoft have been very good. Maybe that will turn around at some point if they can find an
Yeah.
advantageous way to take over some of these leading franchises. But yeah, I there's always something to talk about here. But I do wish the saga would turn more positive, and it's
Yeah.
completely self-inflicted.
Well, hopefully that's like a mortal wound to the parts that they're self-inflicting it on so they can be done with it. But I am interested to see, like, I don't think a lot of people realize this. I happen to notice it as I pay attention to the game in particular. But Rainbow Six Mobile is scheduled to go global on the 23rd of this month. And that is when I think might be Tencent involved. I'm not entirely sure, but that seems to be something they're pushing for. And I mean, it could go either way. I've played it a few times. It's interesting. It's fun, but it's very different from the core game that's been going for 10 plus years. And that could be a big shock to a lot of people. It must be doing okay in Canada, if they're going to if they're expand it. But that was like a soft launch that's been going for well over a year. And lots of like trying to run live ops for well over a year, like season passes and stuff. So I am interested to see where that goes. But like at least there's something that's going to come out and not just be shut down as part of all these. I assume let's hope it's not February 22nd and they're just like, by the way, guys, like you're closed and the game's not coming out. So let's hope
Yeah.
that's not the case. But
Yeah, we'll see.
yeah, another company though that did have some positive earnings and is looking up pretty good. Roblox is an interesting one, just because they've been fraught with a bit more controversy over the last maybe year or so. I'm not sure the exact timeline on that, but they've definitely been fighting off negativity as much as possible to keep that going.
Yeah, I think Roblox is really impressive. If you look at the stock, it's over 50% below its highs, and so there there have been you know additional skepticisms that have creeped in from the public market. Some of which is fair, some of which I think is overblown. But I mean, I think Roblox is super impressive. Let me even just pull up the stock chart right here to see. I think the stock is like right now the stock price is about $68. When it went public, it started trading around like $69 in 2021. So 5 years, it's kind of been full circle of going down a lot, going up a lot, going back down a lot. But the business has fundamentally grown tremendously in that time period. It was just a very expensive stock at
Yeah,
an expensive time when it went public. But what is interesting about Roblox is a couple things. And we talked about this, a few months ago, but just a couple additional details now that 2025 is wrapped up. I mean, first of all, 2025 was a huge inflection point for the platform as a whole. Like their concurrent users essentially doubled over the course of the year. And that was driven by these breakout games like Grow a Garden, Steal a Brain Rot,
yeah,
99 Nights in the Forest, I think it's called. And what's impressive is that, it's these breakout games that drove the platform expansion as more people, like join the platform than otherwise would because their friends were playing or whatever it might be. And maybe some of the growth because of that was pulled forward from the future. But it truly was an incredible year. But what's most impressive about this, besides the fact that these games literally became the highest, like the most played games in terms of CCUs of like all time ever, like in
it's
the games
crazy.
industry, like huge milestones for the platform. And not even that it happened once, but like it happened 3 times in 2025. But, naturally, the more viral that these games grow, the less sustainable they are, and they fall back to earth because you're not going to have 20 million people playing at any given time forever, right? Like
Right.
people are going to move on. But what's impressive is that even though many people have moved on from those games, like Grow a Garden CCUs are like 99% plus below where they were at its highs now,
Yeah.
but these people have stayed around on the platform. And
Yeah.
so these have been huge customer acquisition events for Roblox as a whole, and they've done a great job of keeping them around. And that's just a super bullish sign for Roblox as a platform. And related to that, I read in their latest investor shareholder letter that published a couple days ago that Roblox revenue is now over 3% of games industry revenue.
Wow.
And yeah, it's creeping on up there, and they've said for I think a couple of years now, like their audacious goal is 10%, and I kind of buy it. Like I see a path to getting there. Like these years, these breakouts, adding new cohorts as every year, like new kids are born. Like there's new
Yeah.
kids joining Roblox. Um, every year, the content depth and what is capable of being built on the platform improves, and the the platform has been aging up to some degree. And as it is aging up, like those people are the ones spending more money on the platform by quite a lot. And so there is a path. I don't know when it would hit 10%, if it'll hit 10%, but 3% is now the lowest it's going to be for for quite a while. And its bookings growth this past year were pretty crazy too. And again, I don't think next year or this year, 2026, will be at the same level because you can't have inflections every year like we saw with Roblox. But it has, as I've said before, it's a compounding engine. It's like the snowball rolling down the mountain,
Yeah. The
and
definition
it's still
network
rolling.
effect kind of thing.
Totally. Network effects are massively strong and only getting stronger. And there's a lot of very fair like conversation about like the child safety concerns and such. And we might see some changes to laws over time that impact to some extent what kids can do on Roblox. We're seeing in some countries more uh like anti loot box laws on minors and how
Well, that would kill half the games or more than half the games on Roblox because like the majority of them seem to be loot box in some form or another.
Yeah, and so there will be changes that these games have to put into place. But like even so, like kids are still going to want to like
Yeah.
put the time in. Like
Yeah.
like the economy design does not matter nearly as much as just being able to like have fun playing games with friends. And so I think the platform will adapt. And I think they have done a good job of being proactive on the child safety stuff. Like right now, they're in the middle of like forced. Like age verification.
Yeah, I tried that out, the visual age verification thing, so then you can only talk to people your age. Although I do wonder if you like end up with gray areas where it's like if you're aging up and you're a little older than your friends, do you suddenly get aged out of being able to talk to your own friends? And so I do worry about some of the details as they're starting to roll that stuff out to cause some disruption, but it doesn't seem like something that'll necessarily like kill any of the momentum they have going.
Yeah, I don't know all the details. I think a lot of it is just restricting chat to
Right.
like you have to be a certain age.
I guess you could always chat on Discord with your friends or something, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there can be other workarounds, I'm sure, but in general, like I'm just generally very impressed. And as I've said before too, their R&D engine is massive. They spend well over $1 billion a year on R&D plus hundreds of millions in capex to just continue building out the infrastructure to support everything. And that's a number that just other companies can't match. And maybe we'll talk about GTA later in this episode. And there's a lot of like hopes about that becoming a UGC platform, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of R&D money uh, to build anything close to the creator capacities that we see in places like
right. Just
like
ask Epic.
Roblox.
They've been trying.
Yeah, and it just takes time. Like I think Epic has been making steady progress. It just takes time and a lot of money to build out all the very complex systems in many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure their hope is that they could catch the people that age out, but it doesn't seem like that's if the growth is still what it is in Roblox. I don't think they're successfully capturing at least a significant portion of them as they age out into there. I mean, at some point, it's just going to be people are just going to play Fortnite in Roblox, and then it's just going to be like, well, sorry, you missed the opportunity because it's just more and more complex games that get built on there. The Roblox just released more AI tools as well alongside all this to try and help push. I mean, I haven't tested to see the qualities like on those, but they're certainly not shy of introducing things that make more players into potential creators, which seems to be their to their benefit, right? Because that took a long time to build up like enough creators to get that platform rolling. And I think Fortnite's maybe struggled with that to some extent, right? Like it's a lot more complicated platform to build for in some ways. And they've had to teach people verse and all those sorts of things. So
yeah,
tricky.
Yeah. Fortnite has, its own restrictions just in terms of, the ecosystem ebbs and flows with Fortnite as a whole. And you can't charge for, as much for like specific items and games to the same extent. And, all of these things. So yeah, there are more limitations there, but yeah, very bullish on Roblox. The last thing I'll say here is that we're actually starting to work on our State of UGC 2026 report. We've published this report for the past 2 years, and it's been really popular and helpful to a lot of teams both times that we've done it. And I expect this year to be just as good and just as helpful. So probably by early mid March, that will go live. But everyone can look forward to that.
I think it's always fantastic because it's such a hard market to keep tabs on, like to pin down, because it's by its very nature fragmented all over the place. Like there's no earnings report for UGC. So it's just, you got to find a way to get it. So I definitely appreciate all the work that goes into those because it's just like a lot of collecting information and then synthesizing it. So switching over to another area that's maybe not like necessarily earnings driven as much, although I'm sure there will be plenty involved. It's sort of a broader one, which is now that we've had the holiday sales and now that we're deep into the RAM chip shortage, as well as that could bleed into other chip shortages, who knows? Consoles have been in kind of an interesting place, kind of coming from, where we saw them maybe last summer And then I think there's been kind of a good amount of changes, or at least trajectory changes for all the major different platforms across that. Going to this year with the chip shortages and stuff, you had price raises and things like that. People can't really discount the same way, even on older hardware now, where prices on older hardware are actually going up instead of down. And like Black Friday sales, we're like, we're going to go back to the old price, like for PlayStation, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, curious your thoughts on where we're kind of going, say over the next maybe even 6 months with consoles, because we're not like seeing necessarily even like information on next gen consoles outside of Switch 2 so much yet.
Yeah, my honest take is I don't think much has changed here in terms of the trajectory of the main players, regardless of price increases. The Switch 2 was the best selling console ever, and that shows the affinity fans have for wanting to play Nintendo games and getting the latest new console there, and that will continue to drive sales for many years into the future. So we're still like very early uh in that growth curve, which is taking place while the other consoles are fading. Xbox really been underperforming, and the changes it has made lately just kind of further solidify that. Like price hikes later into the cycle, like okay, like that's not going to change your your
Yeah,
curve in any
not
material
going to help
way.
it.
Yeah, and increasing the prices of Game Pass, is basically admitting that that business model did not work in the way that you hoped that it would. But you went all in on it, and so now you're in a very difficult spot. And we've talked about before, just like the tension between like if you want to succeed in a console hardware driven business, the biggest differentiator is your exclusive content. But if you want to succeed in a subscription driven business, your differentiator is having all of this content be as many places as consumers can buy it. And so they're kind of fundamentally at odds with each other. And maybe there is a way to balance that by having a lot of exclusives that still drive the hardware sales, and then having more like timed releases onto your subscription service that you have to have at a higher price for it to make sense, and understand that that will never be the engine for your business. And maybe Microsoft goes more back in that direction at some point, but if anything, it seems like they've done the opposite, just because their hardware base has shrunk so much that they can't justify the cost of exclusives on such a small user base. They have to
Right.
go to their competitors like PlayStation to sell their games there too, to make it worthwhile. And they're still, very much focused on, you know, allow their games to be everywhere. This is an Xbox, everything is an Xbox.
Your
And at
microwaves
the
is an
point,
Xbox.
yeah, it's just like, what is Xbox? Like, and so yeah, I'm, not that optimistic about where this is going to go. They need to hit the reset button, probably not even be in Microsoft anymore,
Yeah.
and reset. And then of course you have like the Steam machine, which is cool. It's interesting. I don't think that's really a major threat to these other major console companies, because it's limited what you can play. But for people who are really into their Steam collection and just want to play via Steam and more places, I think it's a great extension of the Steam platform. And Steam is essentially taking an orthogonal approach to its hardware strategy in general that's just different from what traditional console players have done. And I think it'll work out well for them, but I mean, they'll be pretty niche for console. And so yeah, I mean, like whether it's tariffs, whether it's price tweaks, whatever it is, I don't think this fundamentally changes the long-term end game for any of these major players.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things on what you said too. Like, it's definitely looked like in Microsoft been talking about their earnings lately, and Xbox is just kind of dragging. Like everywhere was making money except for Xbox, which was certainly not hitting those 30% growth targets they were promising they'd be able to hit. And those, part of the reason obviously behind the price hikes on the Game Pass, which it didn't hit the mark, right? And to the point of differentiating, like, or spreading it across different platforms, that actually seemed to be relatively profitable in terms of making money off of old games that were just sitting on the shelves at that point. So they definitely have some incentive to go like turn into Sega at that point, and not necessarily like, why are we even a console brand? Why aren't we just like a brand? That's where Xbox is just brand. And like it seems like, for example, Steam Machine isn't necessarily like a threat, but at the same time, like Sony's been porting more and more games over to Steam and to PC. And so it's certainly not, and I don't think they're going to break their exclusives, right? Because exclusives are still very valuable to Sony. But I do think that like it's Xbox that's the biggest, like the biggest to be threatened by the Steam machine in that sense, because it's just, they're both just a PC. And it's like, if Sony's willing to bring their stuff over to Steam, but not necessarily bring it over to Xbox, you're a situation where it's like even worse for Xbox to be in, where it's just like Microsoft's like, why are we even making this platform when it's just like Steam's going to eat our lunch anyways? And I don't think anyone's really buying games off the Microsoft store. I think they're just kind of like, we become a publisher at that point or spin Xbox off. So I think they're kind of, like you said, the trajectory has kind of already been carved, or the path's been plowed, so to speak, over the last like year or two, where they just committed to a path, whether or not it works. And they seem to be going, whereas Sony seems to be doing okay. It sounds like the price is a little bit of a problem for them, but based off the holiday sales, it sounds like they're like, well, everyone else is dropping out, so we still win by default, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm sure the pricing impact, like, it does matter some for them, but in the big like competitive scheme of things, they're like so well positioned, because who is like really competing against them? There is no one that does what they do at the level that they do it. And bringing games to PC, I think it's smart, and they generally like space out the timing of the releases so that the proprietary hardware gets the biggest advantages there. And they recognize at this point that people, the console market's not really growing. Like, people who want consoles get them, and people who don't won't. And then and then otherwise they wouldn't be playing their games, so they might as well increase their revenue by eventually taking their games to other platforms. But yeah, we'll see. I know there's been a lot of bullishness around Nintendo, and they have like movies and stuff, new movies and such coming out, which are good. It'll be hard to live up to how successful the last Mario movie was. But the fact that they're keeping it going, that adds a nice high margin revenue stream to their business. But yeah, I still wonder at the end of the day, like, the Switch 2 is doing very well, but is the games industry still going to grow around a business like Nintendo? And if you look at like their base of just how many people are playing games and active on the Nintendo platforms, like, it actually is down a little bit from its highs. And it's not that that's a red flag. It's just a sign that, these are very mature industries and businesses at these points.
I mean, it's too bad for Nintendo they didn't have, or at least as far as I know, a Mario game slated to drop right around the time of the movie, because I think that could be a huge, I hate to use the term game changer because it's terribly overused, but I think at this place it would make sense because that would really, I think, just skyrocket Switch sales because they've not had the greatest launch titles necessarily. So it'll be interesting to see like if they can continue like push through this year, because they haven't announced a lot, but then they've got the movies seem to be coming out faster than their games at this point.
Yeah, Mario Galaxy 3
as well. Yeah, at this point. I mean, they did push out, like, they're pushing out a lot of ports of older games, which is kind of an interesting strategy, where they're like, we don't have a lot of new games to push out, so we're going to like revamp old games. We're going to try and remonetize them. We're even going to try and like overly monetize Virtual Boy emulation, and they're definitely digging a bit. And so it does make me a little concerned about their pipeline of new games, because they do seem to be suffering a little bit from some of the crunch on games in general in terms of like financial and the amount of effort required and the time required and stuff. Despite how successful they've been over so long, it seems like it's finally kind of catching up like the rest of the industry has. So I am kind of curious to see if they're going to do something about that. But like, at least on the flip side, the Transmedia side, we're seeing, a lot of success around, whether it be TV shows or movies. Like, even if this next Mario doesn't do as good as the previous one, if it does even like remotely close, which is very likely because sequels coming after such a successful movie, people just buy blindly anyways most of the time. Like, so you'll see a huge amount opening weekend, even if it like tanks fast after that. But like, there's even like, it's almost parallels the game industry, because there's actually now starting to be indie game movies that are actually starting to hit, like Iron Lung, which is like, what? That kind of came out of nowhere and did, I think it was 21 million opening weekend for like a 9 million movie.
for better or worse.
No, you're helping the whether you liked it or not, you're helping that industry succeed, as long as we don't necessarily get like another Super Mario Brothers movie from the 90s one. But I think it's looking pretty good. But I'm curious your thoughts on like if this is like a cultural push. Like we had the Marvel phase, and some people think we're going, superhero phase, whatever you want to call it. Some people think we're kind of heading into sort of whether it be like video games or video game culture sort of phase. And it did take a while to burn out the superhero phase. So I don't know.
Yeah,
It could
I
help the
mean,
whole industry.
I think we've been entering this phase for a few years at this point with, movies like Uncharted or shows like The Last of Us. And I think that in many ways, games are the new books. And in terms of, like previous generations adaptations were more based on books, but for, upcoming generations, it probably is going to be more game driven. And yeah, directors that grew up with games, producers that grew up with games are going to want to make, great content around great gaming worlds and stories. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a generational trend, like even more so than a right now trend.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I wonder if there's an aspect too of like the games themselves have become higher fidelity over time. If that makes it easier to translate them to movies, like you take something like the difference between Uncharted the game and Uncharted the movie. Like they're still at least relatively people and like it's not crazy hard to translate that to a movie. Whereas like you look at the original Super Mario Brothers movie, and I think that was like, well, how do we turn this thing into a movie? And it was kind of a stretch, but it was also like, how do you make a movie of that? Because the games were much more simplistic. Now, much more games are like, very like cinematic to an extent. And so you take something like Last of Us turned into a TV show. Was that really that big of a stretch? I don't think so necessarily. Like Cyberpunk turning that to, an anime TV. I don't think that was a big stretch. Mario, the newer Mario Brothers movie obviously goes a different direction, but that still kind of suits what
Yeah.
those games are. So I think maybe we're also in a period where it makes a little more sense to try and translate those.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how UGC plays into much of this. We Kaylee, one of our hosts, interviewed the founders of Story Kitchen, which are producers, and they were talking basically about how user generated games are starting to be considered more in Hollywood, and I think that team was even thinking about like Grow a Garden as a movie. Which like my first reaction is like that makes no sense because there's no story there or anything, but at the same time, like they made a successful Minecraft movie, so who am I to
Right.
judge? I still am a little skeptical on some of these more
Yeah.
viral UGC types of games because they also flame out
Right.
faster. They're not like long time proven franchises yet, and some of them are like have become more that way, but most, especially the newer ones, haven't. But uh, yeah, I think it'll just continue to evolve. But even as AI tools improve, like it might not even be Hollywood purely what we're talking about, as much as just better fan made type of content that you can see on YouTube or whatever other
Yeah.
platform that becomes more of a force for building ecosystems, like fan ecosystems
Right.
around more of these experiences. I think that'll be an emerging trend that we see.
Well, I think something like Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2 shows that even if it's a terrible movie, if there's an audience there, it can work to an extent. So, like, maybe it's just scaling to the right size of that audience. But
Yeah.
I mean,
By the way, I went
Mhm.
to I forget what it's called, like the Fright Fest at Universal Studios.
Uh-huh.
I'm probably butchering that name a bit, but I went to the Five Nights at Freddy's haunted house there, and it was actually really good. It was my favorite one that I went to this past year, and it was really interesting to see just how many people were crazy about the IP because it's comparing to just like other proven like horror franchises that are like competing for space and attention. And yeah, that was right up there with the rest,
Wow.
which I found super interesting.
It's funny because it's almost like they have nostalgia for something that was from our youth, not from theirs. The whole Chuck E. Cheese animatronics thing. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
funny,
yeah.
this weird sort of like blurred. Like we get a lot of that these days where like kids are like nostalgic for things that like they weren't there for. It's very interesting. Like, and maybe just the internet having everything available on tap all the time. Speaking of like on tap, AI, UGC, all that kind of wrapped into one, I think is an appropriate segue over to the whole Genie 3 story,
Yeah.
where we see this progressive push with Microsoft, with Google, with all these companies that are pushing AI to try and find some way to sort of leverage video games to get more attention and, highlight some of the technology that they've been able to build. And some of that's just more like imitating games. And I think Genie's a good idea, or a good example of one that is more an imitation of games than it is building games, but it seems to have caught a lot of people off guard with Genie 3, where it was a bit more robust than the previous Genie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think Genie 3 is incredibly impressive, right? Being able to generate worlds that you can like interact with and do things in and add, just kind of help it unfold in the way that you want to see is like incredible technology. Obviously, it still is very early, but there are like really cool, compelling signs of what will be possible to do here. Seeing the stock market reaction to all of this, though, did surprise me a bit. And on one hand, it didn't entirely surprise me because having been in the investing world and being on the public equities business before starting Naavik, I understand that much of Wall Street and the investment world just fundamentally doesn't understand the gaming industry at a deep creative level. And so, seeing an overreaction there, was not shocking, but it also was an overreaction, right? Like there's a fundamental misunderstanding between what these probabilistic models can do, which basically just make things up as they go, right? And it's cool, but games are deterministic. They're built on rules, they're built on set narratives, they got to work the same way basically every time. And these, in other words, like world models do not replace game engines.
Right.
And they do not replace what you can make on game engines. And so seeing companies like Unity and Roblox be down 50% or so from their highs, seeing even Take-Two fall 10% on the day, just purely off of that news, and just see much of the market, be pummeled, along with software and other things. Like it's not purely a gaming industry downturn right now in public markets, but yeah, there is a bit of a misunderstanding. And by the time this episode goes live, our latest Naavik Digest piece will have published. And Mika on our team who wrote it, he talked about, Project Genie and like really digging into the nuances of like, where is this interesting? Where is it not? Like, where have we actually seen AI benefit game development? And one point he makes is that we haven't seen a revolution in game development from AI. There are all sorts of tools, even beyond world models, where you can prompt what you're looking for, and these tools generate these gaming experiences for you. And none of those have like truly blown up and become blockbuster successes. But where we have seen improvement is in 100 different smaller ways across the stack of development. And that will continue to be the case. And what is more likely that we will see from these world models within gaming is that they will probably be a great tool to use for generating assets that then you can plug and retool, rebuild into game engines. And second, we'll probably just see some new novel experiences. Like, I don't want to be overly skeptical about it, because that's like saying, 10, 15 years ago, oh, what are these games on Roblox? They'll never be fun. They'll never be competitive. And here it is today. We talked about over 3% of the games industry revenue, and, seeing inflection points.
Yeah.
And so,
why would kids want to grow a garden in a Lego looking place? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. And so I don't want to be overly skeptical about the technology. I suspect really smart teams will come along and figure out how to use this technology in novel ways that make really cool game-like experiences possible, where, users can, with certain like guardrails, figure out how to like make and explore their own worlds, with themselves, with other people, and that be really interesting. But also, people have to realize too that with world models, the purpose is not always for games. A lot of it is to be a reflection of the real world with physics, so that we can see more faster testing and improvements with other industries like autonomous driving or robotics or whatever it might
Right.
be, or just extracting data to help tune other models and other like development processes. And so we're still very early in that. It's not all about games, and where it is about games, I think it'll be new and interesting, but it's not as devastating as the stock market would have you believe.
Yeah. Definitely, like a lot of people like to assume that somehow going to replace everything instantly, and I think that usually is never the case. Like it's just another technology that I think we'll see use, as you mentioned, but it's just not going to change everything all at once. And the stock market maybe react a little smidge too much to that.
Yeah. And I think that, in the same way that Web3 games is probably the wrong framing. It's just games that leverage some kind of technology that, has some kind of blockchain payment rails or tokens.
Right.
AI games is probably similar in the sense that, yeah, they're just games that leverage new technology in new and interesting ways. And even so, I still think what we see from this tech, maybe not world models specifically, could help accelerate the games industry at some point as we just create more ways for more people to be in these fun interactive experiences
Yeah.
and have it be more tailored and personalized to what they're interested in, and that be more competitive against the personalized short form video feeds that people are
Yeah.
scrolling through. It's just like
Yeah.
like a different version of like personalized interactive entertainment.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll see where that goes, and that could still ultimately be a net positive for the industry, but probably not in the way of it blowing everything else up.
I guess it's so interesting to think of it along the lines more of like a physics engine or certain style of graphics processing in games, like where it's like a technology that like can be part of the game and used by a game, but doesn't define the game necessarily, or it
Yeah.
does in another experience, right? And it's like it can go either way with that. Like physics engines didn't define games, but they certainly became an important part of them and more over time. But you can still find plenty of 2D games with no physics, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. It doesn't replace it. It's just like it's appropriate here, so we use it here, kind of thing.
Yeah, and just a couple quick plugs, even to just end this segment. I mean, one, you wrote a piece about world
Right.
bottles about a year ago. We did it in partnership with Lightspeed, and it's a year old, so some of it is outdated, but it covers the history of how we got to this point, and some ideas for how to think about it for the future. And so, yeah, I definitely still recommend checking that out if you want to understand kind of the history of this trend and what all different teams have been trying to do with their different approaches to the tech. And then second, Alex Takei, another one of our great hosts, recently interviewed Pim DeWitt, who started Metal and recently has kind of rolled that into General Intuition, which is a world models company that is built on a lot of the data that he gets from Metal. And there was some just really interesting conversation there about how to think about some of this too. And I expect that as this becomes a bigger deal in the industry, we'll do much more. But yeah, Devin's piece from a year ago and then Alex's interview from I think less than a month ago
Wow.
still are super
Yeah.
helpful.
I think the overall gist to me going all the way back from there is like games aside and all that stuff, world models will be super important. Like, so it's good to know about them because they will be an important part of AI technology, because it's like it just means like, can AI understand the world and like understand what worlds are like and things like that? Yeah, I mean it's obviously beneficial as we go into robotics, especially. There's a big push for that this year. Going to be super important. Will that affect games? Hard to say on that one, right? But it's definitely going to be a technology that is going to get a lot of investment and effort. But speaking of investment, I guess we wanted to kind of towards the end here, just kind of play a little game of like just looking at the market as a whole and some different areas, and just kind of calling out buy, sell, or hold. Obviously, not necessarily
Yeah.
investment advice; it's just for fun. But we wanted to kind of like as an overall sentiment check and kind of a sort of future pacing the what might be going on with some of these topics, companies, things like that. Um, so I mean, I'll just start off with one that we mentioned off and on a little bit earlier, but we didn't like dive directly into just the company, Microsoft. Buy, sell, or hold.
Microsoft as an entire business buy. But if you're talking about the games business, sell. And I think we covered the games business part pretty well. But as a whole, I mean, Microsoft is not a games business. That really
Yeah,
is a rounding error.
which is the hard part because you can't invest in just the game business part, right?
Yeah, probably for the best. And in this case, Microsoft or Xbox shareholders through Microsoft should be grateful that the rest of the business has has moved in other directions. But yeah, I mean, Microsoft is increasingly like a cloud data center based business at the end of the day, and has been at the forefront of scaling up with AI. And so I'm pretty bullish on like all of these hyperscalers in general. And we've seen all these reports lately from their earnings of late that they're all scaling up their capex to like pretty ridiculous degrees. I forget exactly what it is for Microsoft, but even yesterday, Amazon announced that their guidance for capex is like $200 billion, like insane numbers. And the reaction that we see from the market for these increased capex pushes has been generally negative because there's just questions about the ROI. But what we also see is that the demand far outstrips the supply of GPUs that that all of these companies have. And so I don't know. I'm pretty bullish having just seen the inflection improvements in all of these AI tools, like what we've seen with Claude Code and the
Right.
agents recently. I've been playing around with Replit and building all of these various like personal tools for myself and thinking about how we can even use some of this to accelerate prototyping at Naavik. And it's just very clear to me that at least in the workforce, the demand is not gonna stop anytime soon at all.
No.
I do not see an AI bubble on the horizon
Yeah.
anytime soon.
I mean,
And
there will be bad investments regardless. You could
of
consider
course,
those sort of a bubble, but not really, right? It's just part of a cycle where you have to make investments, and some of those are not going to work out.
yeah, but that's probably not Microsoft's, which is one of the
No,
biggest businesses in the world. So yeah,
probably
I mean, my
not.
buy is just I'm generally optimistic about that, but none of this is investment advice. I'm not necessarily buying Microsoft stock
No, no.
here, but and for them to double from here, they got to add several trillion and market cap, which is easier said than done, but still potentially doable. But yeah,
Well,
buy.
I wanted to throw out another one that was kind of like another one that's gone very in on AI and is a public traded company, but a bit more of a wild card than Microsoft, I think, which is Crafton. Buy, sell, or
Crafton,
hold.
I'll give them probably a more optimistic hold. I like Crafton. I think it's a well managed business, and I've always respected the fact that they have tried to pretty aggressively reinvest their PUBG money into new efforts in ways that I've always felt contrast to some of the more conservatism that you see in other larger publishers. And not all of these projects have worked out, but that mindset of reinvestment and reinvention is there, I think, at the at a leadership level and still founder led, I believe. And I know Crafton is also one of the publishers that has at least spoken more about investing more heavily into AI and thinking about how it can transform processes and ways of working around the business. I don't know enough about what they're actually doing there to like have like a
Yeah.
strong take of if it's working yet or if
They're
it's going
super
to take
interested though.
if it's going to take a lot more time to like really sort itself out and be and whether the GPU clusters that they're buying like really pay off. But I I like the mindset that they have, and I like the the investments that they're generally making.
They just have to emerge from all that Subnautica drama.
Yeah, which is
Shake that off.
which I don't think really is that huge of a deal. They can
No,
move
it's
past
just I
that.
think the negative drag down on them from a publicity standpoint at the moment.
Yeah.
But they have plenty else going on. In fact, they even have like a new PUBG 2D game that's like I'm not sure if they're the ones who published it, but it was just interesting to see they're trying to branch
Oh,
out.
interesting.
But it was on Steam and I think on early access right now. I saw it. It's interesting they're trying to branch out that franchise a little bit. So definitely one to check out. I don't know. I'm kind of curious. I haven't tried it out myself yet, but thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
Um, it's more on like not necessarily specific companies, but like kind of trends. I think is an interesting one that I think a lot of people have been thinking about more so over the last year or so with a lot of the games that have done well, which is AAA versus AA, and maybe even more just from a trajectory standpoint, buy, sell, or hold on those.
Hmm. I think the definitions of these things will probably
A little
change.
loose, yeah.
Um, Probably lean more bearish on AAA and lean more bullish on very specific teams and AA. I think that the opportunity for smaller teams to punch above their weight is growing, and that'll enable more of these smaller teams to just compete at a AAA level. And we've seen this, even like Embark Studios, what they've done with the finals and Arc Raiders, like, it still probably leans a bit more AAA, but even so, like the team sizes and budgets there are a fraction of what you will see in an EA or Activision, but they are competing at that level recently with Arc Raiders, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see more of that. I mean, obviously, Game of the Year last year, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33 is another type of team that fits that. But I don't think these are necessarily one-offs as much as signs of what's to come. And I think that even the funding market will start to reflect that more and start coming up with more specific structures and ways to support the the hyper talented small teams with big ambitions.
Yeah, it seemed like Nexon learned a lot from that, from Embark, and I think that was like a really good sign of like they've been like, wow, there's actually something here. Like, there's ways to like approach this that are good, and they were synergistic where Nexon could provide things to Embark, Embark could provide things back. I hope Embark shares their secret sauce a bit out because they've talked a bit about improving development processes and all these other things, but not really like share the recipe to the rest of us that are having to make cuts everywhere. It'd be nice
Yeah.
because I think we could all use it right about now.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. They don't have to share
Yeah.
their special sauce, but I doubt they'll be the only team that emerges like that in
Yeah.
the coming years. But of course, like, while there are these hyper talented teams to still be optimistic about, and those can kind of hold the torch for double A, if you want to call it that, that still is maybe not representative of the entirety of double A.
Right.
And as the market continues to get more competitive, like more games continue to get released every year, the barriers to creation keep falling. Most of double A will get squeezed, but the kind of the top of the top tier of them will, transcend and make the rest look good, I think.
Yeah. I guess it'll just be a matter of like whether or not we can like slowly crawl past the whole like AI minefield that seems to be attached to it for both Clair Obscura and Embark. That at least Embark seems to be managing to like get past fairly well, but it's like
Yeah.
there's just always this sort of like stigma attached to it, even if it's like such a relatively like minor use or a use that like it seems relatively fair game. But we're not going to go into the ethical quagmires there, but it just seems like that is sort of a little bit attached at the moment. I mean, feels like Helldivers 2 was one of the few that like managed to dodge that, because as far as I know, they didn't have any AI stuff attached to it. But it's like this seems to be, because it's, as you mentioned, it's clearly finding more use. It's clearly empowering Double A to be able to punch a bit above their weight in certain areas. So it'll be interesting to see if that becomes a sticking point for that sort of growth or not. And as you said,
Yeah.
like the lines blur between what you call double A and triple A anyways. It's more just a call it whatever looks right to at least have an interesting discussion versus EA versus Embark. I think is a pretty bit different discussion in terms of like scale. So
Yeah, for sure.
From that angle though, like and it does involve all of these really actually, is PC gaming as a trajectory, maybe compared to consoles, maybe not, maybe compared to web games, even like, or stuff like Roblox, where they're just kind of multi-platform, just PC game in general. Buy, sell, hold.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally a buy. I don't think we'll see crazy growth, but I think that we'll see some, especially as more of the world, takes on gaming PCs, and And yeah, I mean, maybe like the caveat to this is that, companies like Valve sort of changed what it means to like play on their platform, right? We talked about how they're entering console as well, but it really is just like an extension of their like of PC gaming for them, and not really
But
as much
but
of it
don't
like
play
a
their don't downplay their controller though. I think that gets downplayed too often. I think that's still innovative above most of the other console controllers out there.
yeah, yeah, not saying that at all. Like I actually like what they're doing is really impressive to me, and I'm really curious to see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, PC gaming will continue to creep up, I think, over time. But seeing more of like the what these leading companies do to expand to other platforms and just basically take what you do on PC elsewhere, I think
Yeah.
is interesting. Whether it is Steam, whether it's even Epic, just continuing to try out what they're doing with new platforms and like being on in new places. That is additive, even if it's not world changing.
Yeah, I guess you even have to go in the other directions with like Epic trying to be on mobile too with
Yeah, yeah,
their
exactly.
store. I don't think we'll see a
Also,
Valve store on mobile though.
yeah, also just to throw some of this back at you, I've been paying more attention to prediction markets lately, just as they've been blowing up. And for the video game industry, there isn't a lot of activity on prediction markets, but even so, it's kind of interesting to just see what people are talking about. And so I was looking at Kalshi and Polymarket. And one interesting pattern is that basically like almost everything that is on both of them is related to GTA 6. And
Right.
so part of me wonders like what are people even going to talk about once GTA 6 comes out? What are people going to be looking forward next? It's going to be hard to top that. But a couple things that I think might just be worth getting your reaction on too, just for the
Yeah.
the fun of it. One of the predictions is, will GTA 6 launch be postponed again? And on Polymarket, there are 34% odds of that. Would
Yeah.
you buy, sell, or hold those odds, you
I would
think?
say the odds are definitely above zero, but I don't think they go above 50%. I think sub 50%, but it's definitely a possibility because there's so much writing on that at this point. It's like make or break the whole game industry, it seems like at this point when it comes to perception. And I think the money that was made off the first one, or the previous one, was so much that you could justify so many delays. It's just a question of whether Take Two's like, look, man, our quarterly reports, like, you got to kick this thing out this quarter for our financials. I do think, and I predicted a couple of their delays before on previous roundtables and stuff like that. And that's not to
Yeah.
toot my own horn. I'm going to say that I don't.
It's a
think,
good bet for
yeah, I
that
don't think they
studio.
will this last time. But there has been, some layoffs and other things and attempts at unionization, stuff like that, that could cause some delays. But I think they're more likely to kick it out not 1,000% polished than to delay it again, is my take. But it's a non-zero odds still.
Yeah, a month ago, the odds of it getting postponed were over 50% on Polymarket.
Yeah.
And it dropped to about 25% recently and is now, 33 or 34%.
I mean, they did put the marketplace out for the mod stuff, and maybe that was like a delaying tactic, like everyone look over here. But it certainly is like it didn't have any negative effect on perception of the launch. As you said, the predictions have gone down. Maybe that's just people waiting and seeing no negative news and being like, well, maybe it is on track.
Yeah. There also are on Kalshi predictions for Game of the Year, and GTA 6 is at 41% odds. Second is Fable at 17%. Resident Evil Requiem is 6%, and then it just falls from there. I think Wolverine
Fable sounds more like it's getting
is
like a
around there.
Razzie than a Game of the Year from everything that the track that's been going down. I don't know. Like it. I mean, I could be wrong. Could be seeing biased information, but it's like it definitely doesn't look like that was on a good track for Game of the Year kind of thing. But you never know. It's awards shows. Like they have their own particular biases too. So it could go any which way. But I do think I do wonder like if GTA would be like considered a Game of the Year kind of thing, just because it's like, like is that an Oscar movie kind of thing, right? Like where it's like it may be the most successful movie of the year, but that doesn't mean it would win an Oscar kind of thing. Like it definitely will it strike the judge's fancy? I guess that's more the question than whether or not it's Game of the Year worthy, because I think if it delivers even like half of the hype consistently, it's worthwhile, you know what I mean? But it's like, I think it's, we didn't touch a ton on GTA earlier, but I think it's worth noting that like there's been this slow ramp up where GTA's still been making money. And I was just checking Steam charts yesterday, and like 5M, their mod launcher, has been trending upwards still since the mod tool launch, I think, or the mods marketplace, stuff like that. There's clear interest there still. People aren't like, I'm bored of GTA now, I think I'll go elsewhere. I just think the hype just gets, as Bane once said, the fire rises. I think that's still on track for that. So
yeah. Well, yeah, we'll have to get Overwolf on at some point to talk about what they're seeing in the mods for what that could become.
Oh yeah.
Another just like quick thing there is one game that has 5% odds already is Half-Life 3.
Right. So
which is like, not even announced.
There's been a lot of, so Deadlock wasn't even announced, I don't think, yet. And I've been playing that for well over a year. So I do think like there's been a lot of pretty close to validated leaks on Half-Life 3 progress, but they work on Valve time. So it's like, if you're talking about eventually, I think Half-Life 3 will eventually come out and it'll be amazing. Soon? Probably not. I think that's the logical.
And winning game of the year, 5% odds
when it comes out. Like I said, for this year, probably not. But I do think there's always the possibility Valve looks at Steam Machine as a opportunity to have a launch title of like Half-Life 3. Or I don't know if Deadlock would be close enough either, but we don't know where Half-Life 3 is at. But I would love to see them do another orange box kind of thing. Take something like Deadlock, take something like Half-Life 3. I'm not sure what else they got cooking, but I think they could put together something really interesting and just blow everyone away and then drive huge interest in the Steam Machine, the way the orange box actually landed really heavily on consoles when it finally hit there. I mean, obviously it helped launch, Valve, Steam altogether, but like previously they had said in that one documentary that came out a little while ago that they just didn't feel like there was a need for Half-Life 3 at the time. It wasn't that they were against making it. They can count to 3. They just didn't see any point in it at that point because they didn't have anything new to do. And I think they've proven they have new things to do. Half-Life Alyx proved they had new things to do in that area. You could consider that a Half-Life 3. And then, they even messed around with stuff for the Steam Deck. They're the crazy like tutorial kind of thing they did. So playing a lot of Deadlock again recently as well, because they've been introducing new characters, is still a great game, even if it's very polarizing. So
yeah. But anyways, I think these prediction markets are interesting, and I hope they get more robust on just across like all industries, because it's interesting to see. But yeah, there are other things here, like, is the PS6 going to be announced before 2027? And there's 78% no odds, which I feel like should be higher. There's also like more random things, like, will Bethesda release a new Fallout game before July, which is like, why is that a question?
Will it be playable?
But the no is at 90, like I think 91%. So there's about 10% saying yes, which I don't know, maybe is easy money, but maybe you could get burned if there's a mobile game that comes out of nowhere.
There's very little protections from a lot of abuse of those markets, so I wouldn't take them as gospel. But they're certainly interesting to follow. And I think they're going to grow.
Some of these are low volume too, and so they're not maybe the most accurate. But even so, I think that these prediction markets are going to kind of help us gauge better and better what's going on around the world in all sorts of like very niche ways. And so yeah, hopefully maybe we can check back prediction markets in the future. And
hopefully some of those come true, because those were good news kinds of things. So
yeah.
I'll take them.
So anyways, random thing to close on, but I found it interesting.
Absolutely. Well, this is one big talking version of a prediction market. So definitely appreciate the extra questions. There some interesting topics to come from those, I'm sure. And the year's just started. So I think it's important to point that out, that we've just gotten ramped up for 2026. And I don't think it's going to be a slow year, no matter, regardless of what changes are going to happen. It'll be interesting. So appreciate you all for tuning in. Appreciate you, Aaron, for jumping on. Always great to have these kinds of conversations, especially a nice change of pace from just, interview style stuff as well. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and we cover a lot of it in our digest, but in a little bit different format. And so if you're not, of course, reading that, make sure you are, because you should be. It's great. It's fantastic. content. I'm not biased at all, but I think it is wonderful, and it comes out a lot. There's a lot of content, so make sure to check that out, as well as, of course, all the many of other interviews, other hosts, other things we have going on here at Naavik. And of course, make sure to reach out to us. Also, we'll see what's going on with GDC, but I think we could reach out to us as well and see what's going on for that next month.
Yeah, and the newsletter will be probably soon giving out a shout out for just lining up for booking meetings and such. If we do have any event plans, which we would probably do with some of our partners, we'll also let you know there too. So stay tuned. But yeah, definitely look forward to seeing some of you at GDC. It should be a good time.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Aaron, and hopefully everyone's going to have fun with that and don't get too crazy. But appreciate everyone tuning in, and of course, feel free to discuss our predictions and opinions out there on social media. We'll see you on the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.